Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Jozarov chess channel, and welcome back to our Queen's Gambit decline studies. So in these studies, we have seen some great openings and great defenses after the first moves d4, d5, and c4. And today we continue with our Queen's Gambit decline studies and the so-called Hastings variation. And the Hastings variation studies we have started yesterday. First of all, we have seen a beautiful, sharp tactical game in top engine level. And today we continue with our Hastings variation studies with a little bit more from Black's perspective. We have to understand, I think, the strategic concepts of this opening. Really, there are many tactical ideas that could happen to you, so that's why I think with this video we will solve many problems of the Hastings variation, and this will be then actually also our last video of this variation of the Queen's Gambit decline. So let's see now what is the Queen's Gambit decline and what is now the Hastings variation of this beautiful opening. So here after move knight you have 3 d4 d5 d4. We want to first of all reach the semi-Slav structure. After 3 knights variation of the Slav defense, we play the move e6, which becomes now the semi-Slav defense. And after move bishop to g5, now comes a move that will lead many times into the Hastings variation. So although the Hastings variation is named after move queen to b3 that white is playing, actually I think white gets provoked to go into this Hastings variation by this move that black is playing by the move h6. And you can say now, okay dude, what you're talking about, it's just a pawn move, why is this move so important? Actually, this is quite a provocative move already by black, because if white goes now into this line, bishop to h4, and if white is trying to stay with the bishop pair on the board, if white tries to still pin the knight on f6, there is huge tactical problem after d takes c4. After d takes c4, of course, white will continue with the move e4, hitting the pawn on c4, but now with g5, bishop to g3, b5, the game gets quite complicated. Not only for white, we have to say black has also some problems here. Okay, black has now a pawn majority, got an extra pawn, has now a 4 versus 2 situation on the queen side, where it's of course a huge advantage. But white has the dominant center with d4 e4, but we have to say it, h6 g5 is also already a weakened pawn structure. So you see h5 is weak, f5 is weak, g6 is weak. So there are many targets, of course, that white can also attack in the position. So the engine gives here equal chances, but it's really one of the most complicated positions to play. So that's why after move h6, as I said, black is already forcing a huge reaction with this move, although it's a tiny little move by the pawn, but actually the game is already defined by the next couple of moves, because now many times white doesn't want to go into this bishop to h4 line that led into this complicated things of the semi-Slav position. So after move bishop to f6, queen to f6, now after move queen to b3, we have now reached really this Hastings variation position. And as I said, it's almost like black forced white to go into this line, because I'm not sure if white would ever play the move queen to b3 in the beginning if he wouldn't be forced by the move h6 already. So probably he would go with e3, bishop to d3, then kingside castling, and would go into a more solid game. Now with move queen to b3, we can say already many things about this position. First of all, what we can notice, okay, black has the bishop pair, but it's not the optimal bishop pair. It's not really the bishop pair that's exploding all over the board when we have many diagonals that we can attack when the position in the center is open. Still, this is not the optimal, as I said, bishop pair, because the light square bishop is here first of all paralyzed by its own pawn structure. In order to make some kind of improvement of the light square bishop, you have to play knight to d7 in the e5, but it's a long run, because notice that white has already a great tension in the center of the board, so that's why it's not so easy for black to open the position. Look at this, the queen is targeting already d5, the knights are out, both knights are out, and the basic goal now for white is to get the e4 breakthrough motif, because when we took the knight on f6, and when the knight is not there anymore on f6, when we don't have any more a piece that's protecting e4, of course e4 is now a realistic chance for white. White is now trying really to make this goal e4 e4 e4. So don't forget about this, because if he gets his e4 goal in a beautiful way, you could get destroyed by the central pawn storm that's coming, especially because of the fact that this pawn storm would be supported by both of these knights and the queen, of course. And notice also a good thing for white is that white is already 3 pieces out, has the queen and already 2 knights out. On the other hand, black is only a 1 piece out, only the queen, which is of course not good, just to play with the queen in the beginning. So that's why it's really, really complicated also for black to play the game. So in my opinion, with the move h6, black, as I said, really defined already the game. So in the continuation, you have to play, I think, now the move a5. a5 is a preparation to play bishop to b4. The bishop to b4 move attacks the knight on c3, and as I said, the knight on c3 is controlling e4, and e4 is the move that white wants to play. So that's why a5, in my opinion, has to be played. So now there are several things that white can do. White can play the move a3, white can play the move e3, and white will can play the move e4. These 3 moves we'll now discuss in the continuation of the game. We're starting with the move a3, and the instructive game that I found really in this a3 lines is a beautiful gameplay by Eric Lobron against Alireza Firouzja. Alireza played here with the black pieces, an incredible game he played. After move a3, I recommend you here to play the move a4. a4 is a beautiful move because it leads into complications for white. After, for instance, knight to a4, this could be tempting. We can actually play d takes c4, and queen to c4 is of course not good. We'll simply play b5 and we'll trap the piece. So that's why in the continuation, queen to c2 has to be played. Now we play b5 anyway, and now comes the dirty part. Knight to b6 seems like losing. It seems what you're talking about. Why should you allow this move? But actually, there is a beautiful line here with the move bishop to b4. The knight has to cover. Now we play rook to a6, hitting the knight on b6 after the knight takes on c8. Look at this. Now we play a beautiful move, kingside castling, and there is no good square for the knight to escape. Every square is taken, and there's not even a pawn that maybe the knight could be sacrificed for. Many times when you have to give back material, at least you can maybe sacrifice then the knight for a pawn, and then you go into a maybe line where you have an extra pawn, and then you go into a favorable endgame, of course. So now the knight cannot even take a pawn and cannot escape. So although white has temporarily an extra piece, but white cannot do anything now with the piece. So in the continuation, for instance, rook to d1 would be the continuation. Now we pick up first the knight on d2, rook to d2, and I think after rook to c8, black is solid here. Black has great chances, especially because of some ideas. Knight to d7, knight to b6, knight to a4 is an opportunity, maybe hitting the b2 pawn. All e5, c5 are also cool goals. The e5 goal, I think, is the main issue here for white, because when we play e5 and after d takes e5, for instance, then we could have here a 3 versus 2 pawn majority on the queen side, supported by the rooks, maybe then afterwards also supported by the knight. So in my opinion, this could be powerful game. So see, after move knight to a4, I don't think that this is a good game anymore for white. White could have really many complications in the game. So instead of this move knight to a4, you have to play, of course, queen to a2, and now black continues with normal development, knight to d7, and is preparing now to move e5, e5. That's now the main move that we want to play, liberating finally the long diagonal for the light square bishop. So you cannot do it immediately because there's also a problem around the square d5, so that's why it has to be prepared. In the continuation, white will probably play the move e3. We're playing bishop to d6, again preparing e5, and here the continuation after move bishop to d3. Here you have to play d takes c4, releasing the pressure in the center of the board because we are vulnerable around the square d5, and after a bishop to c4 that white is playing now, e5 is tempting, but don't do that immediately because knight to e4 is going to happen and you lose the bishop. In my opinion, here the best line is to play bishop to c7 and then castle, and then to go with this aggressive move e5. In my opinion, this should be a good continuation here for black, and I think in this particular line you could solve all of your positional problems. So Alireza Firouzja played a different line, a queen to e7, then afterwards he gave up the bishop. He had a great game, and I really don't want to show you now the whole games of every particular variation of every particular sideline, because then of course the video would last for maybe 2 hours. But as I said, the most important thing is here to recognize after d takes c4, we release the pressure here around the square d5. Now after bishop to c4, we step back, and now we push the pawn on e5, knight to e5, and both of our bishops will be liberated. So in my opinion here, black should be much better. Black should have a really here beautiful active game. So that's why, as I said, after move a5 that we're playing, in my opinion, this a3 move is simply too weak. In my opinion, this is something that white should try to avoid. Let's see other possibilities instead of this move a3. White could go also with the move e3. If you face this move e3, don't play a4 anymore. It's a different story because now the bishop is already on in the game. It's already attacking c4. After move a4, knight to a4 is now a good choice because, okay, we can play d takes c4. Okay, it seems again with the move b5, there is a beautiful fork against two minor pieces, but actually white can pick up the pawn on c4 immediately. Now b5 is not so good anymore because we'll play simply bishop to b5, c takes b5, knight to b6 creates the fork against both of these pieces. Queen to d8 has to be played. It's a must line that black is playing. Now after move knight to a8, we can play of course queen to a5, hitting the king and also the knight on a8. Queen to c3 cannot be played because of bishop to b4. You lose the queen. But now after knight to d2, bishop to d7, the game becomes really complicated after this move, after move d5, and I guarantee you, you will not have a good game here as black. Although you will probably lose the knight here, white will probably lose the knight, and black will have two minor pieces for the rook. But this is not the optimal position, especially because of the fact, look at this, queen to a8 you play. Okay, now we pick up here the pawn. Look at this, you have to play f takes e6 instead of bishop to e6 because your pawn on b5 is hanging, and black has a weakened pawn structure. Is also down 2 pawns. Of course, as we said, he has 2 minor pieces for the rook, but I really would not love to play anymore this game from black's perspective. White will simply castle, bishop to e7. Now we include more pieces in the game, and now look at this. The rooks are coming into the game. This rooks will come on the 7th rank. You have several problems, and for instance, if you lose the pawn on b5, notice there is now a problem that you could face. Maybe two connected passers here on the queen side could cause you really headache. So in my opinion, when white is playing the move e3 in the beginning, don't go into this a4 lines. Then you just go bishop d6, preparing castling, and now when he plays bishop to d3, now we can play a4 again. This is now the way to go, because if now knight takes a4 happens, then d takes c4 is working again, because look at this, after bishop to c4, b5, bishop to b5, c takes b5, and knight to b6 is going to happen. But now we have this one, bishop to b7, connecting the bishop to the rook. Notice that the bishop is already very dangerous on d6, and the most important move, idea about this move bishop to d6 is that actually the bishop is connected to the knight on b8. This is very important because you see now why. Knight to a8, we have first this idea, queen to g6, attacking the pawn on g2. Queen to b5 has to be played, okay, but now we play bishop to c6, and notice, as we said, the bishop is connected to the knight. It's a different story when we play a4, or we play first bishop to d6 and then a4. So in the continuation after bishop to c6, your opponent could try maybe this kind of an idea, knight to h4, but now we play queen to g4. Your opponent could try maybe queen to b6, getting out of this attack, but now we play simply kingside casting, and okay, maybe the rook could come into the game, we protect everything, but now look at this, you have to play weak moves like g3, g5 is going to happen. So in my opinion, this is really a bad game. Many pieces will be taken. The king is taken on e1. From this point on, the game is a one-way ticket simply in black's favor. So that's why I think after move e3 and here the move a4 that we can play again, queen to c2 has to be played, and now we could just continue with a3 or similar ideas would just undermine the pressure here a little bit on the queen side. We force maybe a weakened pawn structure here on with the move b3. Now we can play knight to a6, knight to b4 is a good chance, bishop to d6 or knight to d7. Again, e5, d takes c4, and similar stuff. So in my opinion, this should be again a good game. So this e3 move, I think for white, it's not such a good move if, of course, black knows what he's doing, because you should not play a4. First, we play bishop to d6, and then we'll play a4. So really, really important tactics. Because if white in any occasion takes out now the pawn on d5, it's in our favor. Then we can go with our e takes d5 move, and then finally mission accomplished. The bishop is coming into the game, so that's the position that we wanted to get in the first place. So let's go back. Okay, we have here, instead of move c takes d5, and we have analyzed now the move e3. Instead of this move e3, I think white needs now to play, as we said in the beginning, a3, e3, and e4 are good moves. White needs to play now the move e4, and this is now the cornerstone position that has to be more and more analyzed. E4 is a really wild line, because after d takes e4, knight to e4, bishop to b4 is finally coming into the game in a beautiful way. Again, I would not recommend you maybe to play here this move queen to b4. We'll simply pick up the queen. A takes b4. White could also take out the queen on f6. But notice, after g takes f6, a rook to g8 is going to happen. We have already a beautiful attack on the a file. Knight to d7, c5 or e5 is going to happen. Maybe b6, c5, bishop to b7. So black has, I think, a solid game here, and there are many games in the database that are won by black in this particular line. So, in my opinion, again, white did gain anything. After move e4 and d takes e4, bishop to b4, white should go into this particular line. King to d1 is actually here the main line, and it was the position that we have also analyzed yesterday, but with some improvements, I think, for both sides, because this position has to be more discussed. There were many games in this top engine game that we have analyzed yesterday that happened, in my opinion. Black didn't play really the best continuations. Now, what black should do in this position is to play the move queen to f4, and white could probably go into a simplified way, could play maybe the move queen to e3, but queen to e3 leads into too much simplified game, I think. Black has still the bishop here. Black will retreat to, with the bishop on e7 again, knight to d7, maybe e5, maybe c5 is a good opportunity. So slowly but surely, I think black will break the central control that white is here, because white has really a dominant position in the center, but still with this beautiful bishop here, I think black should have no worries. So let's go back. After move queen to f4, queen to e3, as we said, is simply too simplified. Bishop to d3 could be now a wise continuation, but now yesterday in the game that we have analyzed between Stockfish and this other engine Rebel, black castled. Black played kingside castling and didn't play aggressively into the game. I think a better choice is to play here maybe the move f5. f5 weakens, of course, here a little bit the pawn structure on this long diagonal on the light squares, but after move f5, many times I think white will make a huge mistake with the move knight to g3. Knight to g3 is a crucial moment. Now, knight to g3 is a huge mistake. It doesn't seem so in the beginning, but actually look at this. What we should do now is now to play the move c5, locking simply this long diagonal. We're not allowing the queen to breathe here, and in the continuation after a3, we can play now the move a4. The queen has to step back. Now we play bishop to a5. We sacrifice the pawn, but now after bishop to d7, I love really this position for black. Although we're down a pawn, but it doesn't matter. Look at this. After queen to c2, we pick up now the pawn. Here, the knight has to attack the queen. The queen has to step back. But look at this. We have a perfect game. And there is a beautiful game played by Igor Novikov against Alexei Drev in this particular position, where Drev really destroyed white here in this position. Really, as we said, black is down a pawn. But look at this. The beautiful bishop pair is finally out. That's the position that we wanted to get with the bishop pair. Knight to d4. Look at this. Knight to c6. Knight to b5 was played, but now the pawn was taken. King to e2 here by white, but now look at this. The queen is coming into the game, pinning the knight. Look at this, what Drev did here. Knight to e5. The knight has to step back. Knight takes f3. Knight takes f3. Bishop to c6. Continuing the pressure. b4. Look at this. Bishop to b4 was played. Everything is falling apart here for white. There is this tension. So after a couple of moves, here white simply resigned. So instead of this move knight to g3 that we said, you have to play, I think, here knight to c3. So this is the move knight to g3 is a huge mistake, because now we can play c5, but it's a different story after move a3. There's simply no here a4 move. That's, I think, the downside. a4 was the move in the beginning. Now we have to give up the bishop, and after queen to c3, c takes d4, queen to d4, knight, queen to d4, knight to d4, after bishop to d7 and knight to c6. This should be again an equal game here for both sides. So as I said, after move queen to f4 and maybe bishop to d3, I think black needs now to play the move f5. Although it weakens the pawn structure on the long diagonal, but now when the knight retreats on c3 or g3, then we have to play c5. For instance, after move knight to c3, c5, a3, bishop to c3, as we said, and the game should be simplified. In my opinion, the Hastings variation is quite a drawish opening line if you know what you're doing. So in my opinion, we have solved now really many positional problems and tactical problems of this opening. This problems will happen to you if you, of course, play the move h6 in the beginning. I guarantee you, white will many times just pick up here the knight on f6. After queen to f6 and queen to b3, you have to know what you're doing. So in my opinion, still, instead of this move h6, if you're searching maybe for an all good opening after bishop to g5, you can go knight to d7. After move e3, you can go into the Cambridge Springs defense with ideas of bishop to b4, knight to e4. This Cambridge Springs defense we have discussed already here also on my YouTube chat channel. Check it out. You can have, I think, a great preparation with the black pieces against white. So, okay, this is now our last study of the Hastings variation of the Queen's Gambit decline. In the continuation of our Queen's Gambit decline series, we'll study different ideas, different possibilities. If you want to know more about the Queen's Gambit decline, please check out our studies so far. We have here more than 110 videos about the Queen's Gambit decline. We have discussed the Harvard's attack, Chigor defense, Taraj defense, Ragozin, the Vienna variation, and many, many more. And here you can check out the whole series. Here's the link. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.